What I learned after failing my English exam twice. Hello, friends! In today's episode, I want to share a true and emotional story about failing. Yes, not once, but twice. But this isn't a story about giving up. It's a lesson in growth, mindset, and rising again. If you've ever failed at English, or felt like a failure, this episode is for you. Let's begin. Part 1. The first failure. I remember the first time I failed my English exam. It was during my second year of university. I had been preparing for weeks. I had flashcards, notebooks full of grammar rules, hours of listening practice. I even skipped hanging out with my friends just to study more. I thought I was ready. I believed I would pass with ease. But when the results came, my heart dropped. I had failed. Not by much, just a few points below the passing score. But that didn't matter. To me, it was a disaster. I felt embarrassed, defeated, and ashamed. I didn't want to talk to anyone about it. I avoided eye contact with classmates and even lied to a few people when they asked how I did. I said, "I didn't check yet," or "They haven't posted my results." The truth hurt too much. For the next few days, I was quiet. I didn't touch my books. I ignored English completely. I told myself, maybe I'm just not good at languages. I started to doubt everything, my intelligence, my effort, my future. But slowly, a thought came to me. What if this failure wasn't the end? What if it was a message? Not that I was bad, but that something needed to change. Maybe I needed a new approach. Maybe I had been focusing too much on memorizing and not enough on understanding. Maybe I was learning for the grade, not for real life. So I made a decision. I would take the test again, but not just to pass. This time, I would learn differently. I would learn smarter. I started with listening. Instead of forcing myself to watch academic videos, I listened to things I enjoyed: comedy shows, podcasts about psychology, and interviews with people I admired. At first, I couldn't catch everything, but I listened daily, and slowly, my ears became stronger. I began to understand more, not because I was studying harder, but because I was engaged. Then I changed how I studied vocabulary. I stopped memorizing long lists. Instead, I wrote short personal sentences with each word. For example, instead of writing, ambitious, having a strong desire to succeed, I wrote, I am ambitious about learning English and becoming a better version of myself. This made vocabulary personal, emotional, real. And most importantly, I started speaking more, not in a class, not in front of teachers, but to myself, every day, while cooking, while walking, while showering. I would describe what I was doing. I would tell stories out loud. I created fake conversations between characters in my head. It felt silly, but it worked. I was building fluency, sentence by sentence. I also joined a small online group of English learners. We met twice a week. We didn't focus on grammar. We shared stories. We talked about music, movies, and dreams. And we supported each other, even when one of us made mistakes. Especially then. 3 months later, I took the exam again. I'll tell you what happened next, in Part 2. Part 2. The second failure. 3 months had passed. 3 months of new habits, new strategies, and a new attitude. When I walked into the testing room again, I felt calm. Not because I knew I would pass, but because I knew I had changed. I sat down, looked at the questions, and took a deep breath. The listening section was first. I focused, wrote notes, stayed patient. Some questions were tricky, but I didn't panic. I moved on. Reading was next. I reminded myself not to rush. I scanned the questions first, then read the text slowly. I didn't know every word, but I used logic. I had trained myself to guess from context, and now it was working. Then came writing. I smiled as I saw the prompt. It was about the advantages and disadvantages of social media, a topic I had practiced a lot. I wrote with structure, introduction, body, conclusion. I even used a few expressions I'd learned from podcasts. Finally, the speaking test. This was the part that scared me the most last time. But this time, I saw it differently. It wasn't a performance. It was a conversation. I smiled at the examiner. I spoke slowly. I used real examples. When I forgot a word, I paraphrased. When I made a mistake, I corrected myself naturally. After the exam, I didn't feel exhausted like before. I felt proud. I knew I had done my best. But when the results came, I had failed again. Yes, again. This time the failure was different. I wasn't angry. I wasn't ashamed. I didn't cry. I didn't hide. I sat quietly and asked myself, why? And the answer came easily. I was still learning. I wasn't ready yet, but I was closer than before. This failure was a step forward, not backward. I went for a long walk. The sky was gray and the wind was cold, but my mind was clear. I thought about all the progress I had made. My listening had improved. I could hold longer conversations. I understood more jokes, more movies, more people. I had become more confident, more expressive, more human in English. The exam didn't show that, but I knew it. That night, I wrote in my journal, failing doesn't mean I'm not improving. It just means I haven't arrived yet. I also asked myself one powerful question. If I had passed the exam, would I have continued learning with the same fire? Probably not. Passing might have made me comfortable. But failing made me hungry. Failing kept me moving. So I made a promise to myself, not just to take the exam again, but to keep learning English with love, with purpose, with patience. From then on, I didn't learn English just for a test. I learned to express myself better, to understand the world, to connect with people. I listened to English songs and focused on lyrics. I read news articles and reflected on opinions. I joined a writing challenge online and wrote an English diary for 30 days straight. And most beautifully, I started helping others. I became the one encouraging beginners. I told them, it's okay to fail. I failed twice. And I'm still here. Because I had learned the biggest lesson. Your score doesn't define your progress. Your effort does. And guess what? 1 year later, yes, 1 whole year, I took the exam again. But that part of the story comes next. Part 3. The turning point. 1 year later, 12 months of steady effort. Not dramatic, not loud, just consistent. I wasn't studying 10 hours a day. I wasn't following 20 grammar books, but I was doing something in English every single day. No excuses. I woke up listening to English. I watched the news, listened to short YouTube talks while brushing my teeth, and read 1 page from an English blog with my morning coffee. During commutes, I listened to stories. At night, I journaled in English, even if only 3 lines. It became a lifestyle. One habit that changed everything was my English reflection time. Every Sunday evening I reviewed my week. What did I learn? What was still confusing? What mistakes did I repeat? I wasn't punishing myself. I was simply observing. Like a curious scientist, not a harsh judge. And slowly I saw growth. I remember one special moment. I was watching a movie without subtitles. A character said something fast and idiomatic, and I understood it. Not because I translated it, but because I felt it. That was the first time I truly felt like I was thinking in English. Another time, I met a tourist in my city who needed directions. She looked nervous and lost. I walked up and said, "Hey, do you need help?" She smiled with relief. "Yes, please." We talked for 5 minutes. She said, "Your English is really clear. Are you a teacher?" I laughed and said, "No, just a learner like you." That compliment stayed with me for weeks. Then came the day of the 3rd exam. I remember standing in front of the test center. It was raining lightly. I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. Not because I knew I would pass, but because I knew I had already succeeded. This time, I took the test for me. Not for a school, not for a job, not for pride. For myself. Listening felt natural. Reading was enjoyable. Writing flowed. Speaking felt human. Not perfect, but alive. And 2 weeks later, the results came. I opened the email slowly, heart calm. The screen showed, "Congratulations, you passed." But you know what surprised me? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled. A deep, quiet smile. Because by then, I had already grown. The paper didn't change that. The paper was just a reflection of who I'd become. Later that day, I met a few friends for coffee. They asked, "How did it go?" I said, "I passed. Finally." They celebrated. But inside, I was thinking about the real victory. Not the score, but the mindset I had built. That night, I opened my old journal. The one where I had written, "Failing doesn't mean I'm not improving." And beside it, I added, "Passing doesn't mean the journey ends." Because learning never ends. Growth never stops. English is not a finish line. It's a road I walk every day. Part 4. The Real Lesson. After passing the exam, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel done. In fact, I felt more curious, more passionate, more connected to English than ever before. I realized the real reward wasn't passing. It is everything I became in the process, more disciplined, more confident, more open to learning. One evening, I looked back through my calendar, just to reflect on how far I had come. I noticed something powerful. Every bad day, every frustrating moment, every failed quiz, it was all part of the map. Without those days, I would have never reached where I was. So I started writing. I wrote an article titled, "Why I'm Thankful I Failed My Exam, Twice." It was raw, honest, and emotional. I didn't hold back. I shared how failure pushed me, how doubt shaped me, and how I rebuilt myself, piece by piece, not just as an English learner, but as a human being. To my surprise, that article was shared hundreds of times in online communities. I started getting messages from strangers. I failed too. Your story gave me hope. Now I feel less alone. I was thinking of giving up. Now I won't. That's when it hit me. My failure had become someone else's fuel. That's what learning is. That's what life is. We go through hard times not just to grow, but to light the way for others. So, to you listening now, maybe you've failed before. Maybe you're scared of failing again. Maybe you think others are better, faster, smarter than you. Let me tell you the truth. You're not behind. You're on your path. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. You don't need to impress anyone. You just need to show up every day in your own way. Failing doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're trying. Trying means you're learning. Learning means you're alive. And if you keep going, with courage, with kindness, and with honesty, you will not only pass any exam, you will own your English, not just with a certificate, but with every word you speak, every message you write, every connection you make. So here's your challenge, your call to action. Write down your biggest failure in learning English. Then, next to it, write 3 things you learned from it. Keep that paper, read it whenever you doubt yourself, and remember, failing an exam doesn't mean failing the journey. You are the journey. You are the reason English is worth learning, because your voice matters. Thank you for listening. Keep learning, keep rising, and never ever give up. Until next time, this is English 101.